Welcome to episode 60 of the Half Point Per podcast. We've hit yet another round number to start off the new year. I'm joined by my guest, actually my co-host, should have been guest, Dalton Willie. I was looking down at my phone, and producer, Johnny Fan. Johnny, I made a really important, speaking of guests, this is a transitioning a bungled intro into actually something here. I made an important discovery as a guest in Dalton's apartment over the weekend. And I know we've already talked about it off air. I had to bring this discussion on air for the pod, though. Dalton does, in fact, have a bed frame. This is breaking news for
Dalton
anyone that's
is
known
besides
Dalton
himself right now.
For anyone that's known Dalton for any length of time, you know this is like a big deal. Except actually, the frame is not a big deal. It's a very little deal. It's about this tall.
I like to be low to the ground when I sleep. I feel safer. I feel better, and I can just fall right into my bed. It's very nice, and you get like this little rush when you're falling in.
You fall 4 feet into your bed.
Some of us aren't 6 feet tall, Johnny. Okay, short kings.
You're right. Short kings, but that's not going to be good for your back, your knees getting out of bed. That has to be tough, like waking up.
Well, you know what? While we're on to announcements.
Imagine if Dalton ever has like an injured knee, like a severely injured knee, and has to get up and into that bed often. That's going to be tough.
He's done.
I just won't get injured. I mean, on to announcements, I guess. For a second year in a row, I might take my fantasy league winnings and buy a bigger bed frame just to satisfy the viewers and the listeners.
Thank you. That would be great because we're like,
no, you're not. You're gonna spend it on your Jeep. We've already discussed this.
I'm not exaggerating here. And for those of you who are not watching on YouTube, hello YouTube. You should watch on YouTube, but if you're not, literally, I'm pretty sure the frame was as tall as this phone. Like I think that's about.
I think that was the right size. Or it's not as wide, but
it's not as wide. But like just like height
wise.
I think we're looking at like a solid like maybe like 10 inches or maybe 10 inches off the ground.
I think it's probably like 8 at most.
It's incredibly comfortable. Live yours.
But want to say congratulations to Dalton for winning the Dynasty Fantasy Football Championship on a very weird, wacky year. Some would say there's an asterisk with it, but some would say that anyone who won this year is the luckiest fantasy football champion of all time, Johnny. That's just what some would say. I don't know if I would say that, but I might. But I know some for sure would. I'll say it.
But no, for real, congrats, Dalton. It's obviously you were 2-5 at some point in the season, so it was definitely a big time rally by your team.
I was 2-5, and it took some work, but we figured it out. The running joke is I had 666 points scored, so I made a deal with the devil, and we came out alive with the fantasy win.
And we'll see, Dalton, if your fantasy MVP or LVP was on your squad, and that's what we've got today. We're looking back at preseason stuff. We'll do that first. And then, of course, as I've mentioned in the tweets, on the YouTube title here and on the podcast title, if you're listening there, we're unveiling our fantasy MVP, our LVP, and we're going to highlight one waiver wire hero each that really came through for teams, at any point in the season, but especially down the stretch. And we'll call that one the Cordero Patterson Award because he would be the obvious winner, and neither of us are allowed to pick him as the winner for that one.
Yeah, and if you tell me you drafted Cordero Patterson, you're a liar, and everybody here knows it.
He went in the 20th round of our Dynasty League, so I know for a fact he wasn't drafted anywhere.
I drafted him in our Dynasty League, didn't I?
Yeah, then
I dropped him, and then I picked him up, and then I dropped him, and I ended up not owning him when I needed him.
Yeah, I think all that happened before there was even like one game played. So yeah,
100%. He didn't play a single game on my team, but I dropped him and added him a bunch.
But first, let's look back at some of the preseason stuff, player props, team over-unders, and just player bets. We had a lot of stuff that we bet head-to-head before the season this year. And I have to go back and look, but Dalton, didn't we tie in this last year too? And our tiebreaker was a DraftKings head-to-head in the
divisional
round that I won.
That's exactly what we did.
We tied again this year. Now we scored differently in different categories, so we can break it up. But we tied. I think. Yep, we're both. to scroll a little bit on our doc. We're both 19 and 16 overall. We have a couple of outstanding bets, so it's possible, and we're both different on, I think it's 2 of them that could be flipped. So we're both different. So it is possible we don't end in a tie, but it's looking likely. So we might have to figure out a tiebreaker for that. But I'll run through them real quick. If you want to stop me and talk about any of them, we definitely can. We should talk about some of them, but obviously there's a lot. There's 35 things here, so we're not going to talk about everyone very in depth. But the first one here, Christian McCaffrey, his over-under for rushing yards was 1,025.5. That one, Johnny and I took the over, Dalton took the under, and he nailed that one. I'm going to say that was mostly due to injury, but you know what? It is what it is.
I can predict injuries, actually. That's my call on that one.
Great. I need you to manage my dynasty team for me next year then. So it's funny. I thought, because I did yours first, then mine, then Johnny's. I thought after the first 5, I was like, there's no shot I'm anywhere close to Dalton. You literally got, I think, the first 3 right, and you're 4-1 in the first 5. I was 1-4, and Johnny was 2-3 in the first 5. We both rebounded, though. Josh Jacobs, that over-under was 11.5 rushing yards. I took the over. I was a believer. You guys both took the under. Technically, it's not over yet, but he'd have to have a record-breaking day to get there. So that's, I think, pretty firmly on the under.
Well, he didn't even play a full season. He missed 2 games, didn't he?
Yeah, he missed a couple of games, so he would have at least been maybe within striking distance, but he did have a lot of low yardage. He had like a stretch where he wasn't getting over 40 rushing yards for like 3, 4, 5 weeks. I think that was the stretch where I went on the rant, like, hey, maybe like give him the ball a little bit more. You guys might stop losing. And they've done that a little bit more lately, and they have not lost as often.
We'll find out if they lose this Sunday in a very fun game.
This one was one that was especially painful for me. Jalen Hurts, his over-under was 3,700.5. I pretty much said before the season, this is pretty much a bet on whether or not you think he's going to play the whole season. I know he missed, I think it was 1 game due to injury. 1 game and a quarter. So if he literally plays every game, he would be he's 600 yards behind it right now. So he would have maybe gotten it, but even then, their identity completely shifting from passing to running really hurt Giant Eye's chances there. Dalton again got that one with the under. Another one that is painful here is Patrick Mahomes. His over-under was 5,050.5 passing yards. I think maybe if Tyreek Hill just caught like half of his drops this year, he might have already hit this over, or at least he'd be on pace. He's about 500 yards short right now. Heck, he should have had 60 more yards just on 1 play last week. But that one's going to be an under. He needs 500 passing yards. So, like, not impossible, but probably not happening.
I think we should go back to Jalen Hurts, and probably now's a good chance. We talked about him not playing a full 16, and that was kind of where the bet was. Do we think the Eagles retain him in the offseason? I mean, they're playoff bound. They are officially a playoff team. If you're a dynasty owner, aka me, how do you feel about Jalen Hurts going forward? Obviously, the Eagles have 3 first-round picks in the second half of the draft right now.
Very, very interesting. Our league champ is asking me for unsolicited advice on his roster here. I'm going to be honest with you. I have absolutely no idea. I have zero read. I guess what I would say is I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback to replace him, which early on when he was really struggling, I think people thought even that was like at least as likely as him coming back. But I think it's either he's coming back or they're making a trade. Like, there's not someone in free agency they're going to sign that's better than him. It's either going to be Russ or Deshaun Watson, right? Like, if it's either of those guys, you really can't. You can't predict that. You can't really make any moves thinking that's going to happen or not. I think you just hope that whichever team trades their quarterback to Philly, if that were to happen, I think you hope that either they like Hurts enough to have him come back there, or a third team, like was rumored with Tua when the Deshaun Watson talks were heating up, quote unquote, when Washington would have apparently been willing to jump in and take him. You hope there's another team that's willing to jump in and take Jalen Hurts. There are a lot of teams who should be willing to jump in and take Jalen Hurts. There's a lot of bad quarterbacks out there.
So going forward, in this offseason, we'll probably talk about this a lot, but I think over the second half of the season, the Eagles averaged almost as much rushing yards as the Ravens did 2 years ago. They were like a real ground and pound offense. How are we going to evaluate some of those, the running backs and their two pass catchers, because there's only two relevant players on that receiving core in this offseason?
Well, I think the pass catchers, I think with Dallas Goedert, you kind of have to slot him as like a top 6 tight end, I think. But Devontae Smith, I think as long as Hurts is there and this is the offense they're running, like he's going to be a good player, like top 30 receiver. But his upside is definitely capped just given the situation he's in right now, I think.
Yeah. What about running back? I think they move on from Miles Sanders.
I think he has one more year on his deal, though, doesn't he? Like, I think he's going to be back, and then they won't – because he and David Montgomery are both – I think their contracts align. Because I think Montgomery also has one more year, and then hopefully we get the Khalil Herbert show after that in Chicago. But I think Sanders will be back, assuming he's got one more year, and they should not and probably will not sign him to a second contract.
So you're right. He does. 2022 is his last season. I mean,
I think you just have to hope he stays healthy. He got hurt at every turn. There were never any major injuries that knocked him out for like 2 months, like some guys. But it was just like the other day. It's like, oh, he broke his hand. Oh, he twisted his ankle. It's like, okay, he's out for another 2 weeks. Another 2 weeks. It's like if he just could have stayed healthy, I think he would have had a pretty nice year.
Well, he did his best Jacoby Myers, Dwayne Bowe impression, and he went like 130 touches without a touchdown. It was, I mean, I guess he probably slots in your top 20, right? Just being on that offense and that line. And
yeah, I would have him I think I had him like in the 18-19 range this last offseason. I'd probably have him there. I'm not looking to like go out and buy him in Dynasty because I think there's long-term concern. But if you're just talking redraft value, yeah, I think he's probably a top 20.
He'll also be 25 this offseason, so he's getting old.
Getting old, 25. That's a depressing thing to have said to this 27-year-old. David Montgomery, speaking of him, his over-under was 1,075.5. I don't have his total in front of me, but I think he was pretty clearly like 300, 400 yards away. He obviously missed some time too, but even if he didn't, I don't think he would have got there. Anything to add on David Montgomery, or are we hoping? I think what I said sums it up for me entirely. Is he'll be back next year. He'll be the starting running back unquestioned. It seems like. I guess it kind of depends on Tariq Cohen if he can bite into the passing game a little bit if he ever comes back. But I think we're all hoping that he is gone after next year, and we get Khalil Herbert unleashed in Chicago.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of a bummer because outside of 2 100-yard games, Khalil Herbert outperformed Montgomery in most.
I think he's better. I think he's better, flat out better.
So it's a pretty big bummer, but it looks like they're moving on from Matt Nagy, so that offense could be interesting. And Montgomery has shown a resurgence to be a little better his last 2 seasons.
Herbert could be, if it is a new coach, which I think we think it will be, and it should be. Herbert could have some value if he is being completely looked at as a pure backup. Like, it's very possible that's what he is, but he obviously has the upside. Like, say that backfield all of a sudden turns into the Damian Harris or Mondre Stevenson down the stretch type of split. Like, I think Herbert could have legit value. Both those guys will have legit value at that point if that happened, but that's obviously a very big if that we just won't be able to know unless coaches are really telling us that's going to happen, but they probably wouldn't tell us that.
Yeah, between Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, Montgomery, and Herbert, that entire and Tariq Cohen, since he'll probably play next season, hopefully, they'll all be very interesting to debate this offseason, depending on who they bring in.
Mm-hmm. So Antonio Gibson, now this is the swing bet right here. Johnny and you both took the under. No, sorry, I'm messing this all up. Johnny and you took the over on 1,000.5 rushing yards. I took the under. He needs 110 yards to hit this over. So he'd need a big game, but it's not impossible.
Did it against Seattle in November 29th. Got 111. That's his only 100-yard rushing performance on the season.
He just got activated off the COVID list today, I believe. So it seems like he's playing this week. But yeah, he needs 110 yards. So that that could be a big swing one. There's another one later on down the line that we'll get to as well. This one was a gimme. This is definitely a summer show line. Cam Akers, 1,150 and a half rushing yards. Unless he has a very crazy one game in this game, he's apparently going to play in week 18. He's hitting the under on that one. James Conner, 600 and a half rushing yards. We all took the under. Apparently, James Conner is just very good. It's funny. He's like the RB 6, but he only has 700 rushing yards this season.
James Conner is inevitable. If only I would have predicted him to be this good like I did last season.
James. Yep. You did lose a James Conner bet last year.
I did.
Didn't you?
Yep. Yes.
You should stop making player bets with me because you lost all of them.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later because I went 0 for 4 on those.
Yeah, and there's one that I know my stance. I'm pretty sure I know your stance. Johnny's going to have to be the judge on whether or not the bet stands or not. So there is one that could swing things depending on Johnny's decision. We'll get to that, though. DeAndre Hopkins, we all said over on 1,350. I have 0.6. Pretty sure that was 0.5. Receiving yards, he is pretty solidly at the under. He probably was hitting the under even before the injury because he, along with that offense, had really slowed down. Dalton, any big picture points we should hit with Hopkins, or is it just as simple as if he's healthy next year, he's probably like a late second, early third round pick again because he's DeAndre Hopkins?
I mean, he probably is, but I kind of feel like we're getting that tail end of his career now, at least as an elite wide receiver. I think he was at like a 19% target share before he kind of trailed off because of his injury. And
how old is Hopkins? Like he's 29. Like Adam Thielen's 31. Are we sure that he can't still be good for a couple more years?
I mean, he can, but
really
him and Thielen do make their money a little differently. And I just wonder if I have some questions about the Arizona offense and if it's not Seattle Russell Wilson 2.0 in their first and second half of the season splits, which worries me. But second of all, he's so athletic and getting up and contesting the catch. And one of his big MOs used to just be getting the ball all the time. He was always targeted, and that just didn't happen when their offense was really rolling. And I wonder if that's by design or just by bad luck.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. Not a lot to add there. There's a lot of mystery, obviously, around Hopkins and that offense and what they actually are. So next year is going to be an interesting discussion, I think. And really, we could have a different running back there that we're talking about next year too.
They're both free agents, Edmonds and Connor.
Is it finally Eno Benjamin time?
The truthers
he's gotten a couple carries the last couple weeks.
Oh God, Eno Benjamin hive has come unleashed, and Evan Riggs is the leader of it.
Johnny swiped him from me on the Dynasty waiver wire. That was pain. Johnny has every player that I love. Johnny just has on his team.
I wonder why.
So J.K. Dobbins also tore his ACL, so I'll mention that. So
I'll still take him.
I'll still take him. I'll wait it out.
Will Fuller, 925 and a half receiving yards. I don't even know what he ended up with, but I know that was an under. We talked about Fuller.
I think it's 0. I don't think he caught a ball this season. He never came off IR.
I'm pretty sure he played one game. Let me look. But we talked about Fuller pretty extensively either a week or two ago. So pretty much like we said then, it comes down to
he has 26 total yards.
There you go. So he was only about 899 off. Could have been worse.
I believe. I'll be back again touting him this offseason.
This one was almost as bad as far as how many yards he hit the under. But he played a lot more games. That's Kenny Galladay. I talked about how close he was to his last year's yardage last week, despite playing a lot more games. 1,050 and a half receiving yards was his line. Dalton and I said under. Johnny said over. Pretty brutal loss for Johnny because that one was not even close. that one was very bad for the New York Football Giants.
Yeah, and I'll be interested who tries to talk us into him this offseason because that team
it's going to end up being me. I'm going to talk myself into Kenny Galladay by next offseason, so you can look forward to that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 850 and a half rushing yards. We all said over. I think it would have hit if he didn't get hurt every fourth game that he played, but alas, he's a little man. He's taken a couple big hits and has not survived them.
That's pain.
Tom Brady, this is one that we all took the over on. 4,225 and a half passing yards. I think we all said this was a layup and didn't understand this one at all. He's almost at 5,000, or he might even be at 5,000. He is the lead.
NFL.
He leads the NFL in passing yards. That one was easy. Corey Davis over under 825 and a half receiving yards. We all took the under. That one was aided by injury, but I'll take it.
Yeah, well, watching Zach Wilson play, I might bet the under on anybody not named Elijah Moore on that team this offseason.
Michael Carter had some nice totals.
I meant receiving. I apologize. This is not a Michael Carter disrespect podcast.
Thank you. Tyreek Hill, this is another one. Now, we all said over on this, so this wouldn't swing any results either way. His over-under was 1,350 receiving yards. He needs 113, so he could very easily still hit that number. But we all said over. So either way, we're all getting a point or we're all losing a point in the record column there.
Isn't it funny that if I told you in this offseason Tyreek Hill breaks the record for his receptions and you said, oh,
not his record, just the Chiefs franchise record for receptions in a season.
You would say, oh, then he definitely breaks his yardage prop. And it looks like he's not going to without a really stellar performance in week 18, which he could have.
Well, if he just catches the deep passes this week, it could happen. This one was a very bad bet for Dalton. I think Jalen Waddle probably has had multiple catches that have had more yards this season than Will Fuller. Jalen Waddle versus Will Fuller straight up. I took Waddle. Dalton took Fuller. I'm taking my victory lap on that one. Even if Fuller played the whole season, Waddle is already a better player than Fuller. He would have beat him.
We don't know about that. We didn't get to see it. Still a full season. Will Fuller will be back. Just like at the end of Endgame, when they say Thanos will be back, Will Fuller will be back.
Dak Prescott, 4,825 and a half passing yards. We all took the under. It's going to be under. He's like 600 or 700 away from this line right now. I just want to say I am very upset that Dalton gets away with getting out of this one with a point. Because you would have taken the over if you weren't scared of the arm injury. And the arm injury really hasn't mattered at all. He started off great. All the passing yards were early in the season. You just would have been flat wrong. So you got bailed out on this one.
Don't hate the process. Love the results.
Joe Mixon, 1,100 and a half rushing yards. We all said over. We all believed. He is like at 1,200 and counting. I said not and counting. He's not playing next week. So thankfully he's already hit that. That would have been a very painful miss if he would have missed it by getting COVID the last week of the season. But Mixon had an awesome season this year. And speaking of awesome seasons, this was a W for you, Dalton. Justin Jefferson over under 1,375 and a half. He is over. Johnny and I both said under. You said over, and he is like already at 1,500 plus, and he is going to conceivably get more with Kirk Cousins back at the helm this week.
Let's go. I know I have an L coming up because Keenan Allen's name has not been mentioned yet.
That was a little later on. You've got a pretty big L, a couple of L's actually before that still to get to. So stay tuned. CeeDee Lamb over under 1,050 and a half. He has just barely cleared that. He's like 20 yards over that right now. So we all get a point there. We all said over. Myles Gaskin, 800 and a half rushing yards. Johnny and Dalton took the over. Evan took the under. He is like 200 rushing yards away right now. He ain't getting that.
It's possible.
No.
He needs 238 yards in this last game.
You never know, Evan. You never know.
You know what?
That's over a third of his production.
If you would have told me Myles Gaskin and Bishop Sankey played for the same college team, I might have valued Myles Gaskin differently this offseason. I didn't know he was a Husky till recently, and that's what went wrong.
I think we've learned Myles Gaskin's skill level and proven me right just on the sheer fact that Duke Johnson has come in and immediately been more productive than Gaskin basically all season.
Well, to be fair, if you would have asked me in the offseason who's the better player, Duke Johnson or Myles Gaskin, I would have said the U's leading rusher, Duke Johnson. Unfortunately, I did not know that Duke Johnson would have been tossed around the NFL until he landed in Miami.
Yeah, nothing about Duke Johnson could have told you that he might get picked up off the scrap heap. I'm just saying, I'm pretty good identifying these running backs who I don't think are like quite as good as their ranking. Like last year's Miles Sanders, we were on opposite sides. This year, Miles Gaskin. Maybe listen to me the third time.
Maybe you just don't like Miles.
That's true, but they're spelled differently. So
Still, I think you have an issue with Miles, and I think
well, I like Miles M-I more than Miles M-Y. Really don't like the Miles M-Y spelling. And speaking of side bets that you lost, Gaskin, a top 22 running back or not, and you said top 22. I said not. He is not. He is the RB 27, and he played every game this year, and guys in front of Miles did not. It is not easy to play every game this season and to be the starting running back for basically all of them and not be a top 22 running back, but Miles Gaskin accomplished it.
I mean, he's almost there. He could still get there.
But this bet, the top 22, the fantasy bets are through the fantasy season.
Yeah, I know.
So
some unfortunate people are still playing fantasy football this week.
Well, have fun with any Bengals in your lineups this week, or Aaron Rodgers and company. Have fun with those guys this week. Another side bet that originally I thought I was going to win purely off of injury, but he actually just straight up outproduced him by the time the season was done. Devin Singletary versus Jamal Williams, straight up. You said Jamal Williams. I said Devin Singletary. Singletary's the RB 24, Williams RB 43. Now it was closer than that by points per game if you were doing it that way, but it was still Singletary 9.6, Williams 8.4. So Singletary, I'm telling you, man, nice little player.
If I could have had Williams one of those weeks where there was no Swift, that would have been really close. It was almost there.
I mean, it really wasn't because he also was hurt for a month and finished 20 spots behind Singletary.
I'm just points per game. It was almost there. Could have had it.
Yep, could have had it, but you didn't. Ronald Jones. I can't believe we all took the over. Looking back on this, on Ronald Jones, 725.5 rushing yards. He's at 400 something. We all took the over. He's way under. We're dum-dums for that one. Justin Herbert, I'm a dum-dum for this one. Over-under was 4,550.5 passing yards. You guys were on the over. I was on the under. That one, he's cleared that one pretty easily.
I don't have any authority to speak on the Chargers right now because I know that there's pain coming in this.
The next one, Keenan Allen, over under 1,050.5 receiving yards. Johnny highlighted this one in yellow, wrote $100 wager highlighted in yellow next to it. He really wanted to make sure we didn't forget. Dalton took the under. Johnny and I took the over. And where is Johnny's Venmo for $100? I regret not having that TikTok ready to play right now on the podcast.
Pay up.
You've gotten 15 of it. There is still potential. He goes backwards 30 yards against the Raiders. It's not impossible.
I will bet you another $100. That doesn't happen.
I can't double down on that bet.
Try to give you a Venmo request discount, and you said no.
I'm going to pay you like you paid your fantasy dues over the course of 4 months in maddeningly frustrating increments that I had you counting on.
2 reminders, and I paid you every single reminder. Did I not? Did I not? You are a liar.
We'll
pull up the receipts.
I'll pull up the Venmo transactions.
You can pull up the receipts too.
Kyle Pitts, over under 800.5 receiving yards. Thank God he hit that. He's way over that because he has no touchdowns this season. Pitts had a great year. Hopefully Atlanta someday has a quarterback who throws the good players the ball in the end zone.
Pain.
No, Atlanta's actually cursed. Their best receiving option will not score touchdowns. Julio Jones has given it to Kyle Pitts.
Maybe Calvin Ridley will come back and still score touchdowns someday. Some of us can only dream.
Will Calvin Ridley be back? That's a fun offseason fantasy topic.
Not really, because we really have zero idea. Kyler Murray, over under 624.5 rushing yards. Felt really strongly about this one. Turns out, not so much. Injuries and just not very much rushing production, quite frankly. He's under that, and he's half. He's half of that. He's 300 something rushing yards on the season this year. I think Trevor Lawrence might have close to as many rushing yards, which Lawrence is a good running quarterback, but I think it's pretty close right now. And even if you told me that Murray missed a month, I would not have said he'd be in the 300s for rushing yards.
Yeah, neither would I. Did I bet the under on that?
Nope, we were all over. We're all
Okay,
very
good.
wrong.
Good. I was going to say, if I bet the under on that, there was some weird process going on in my head.
So this is the one right here, and I think Ben had a bad enough game the other night that he is going to go under. His over-under for passing yards, 3,995 and a half. He needed about 580 yards before Monday's game, and he needs about 480 yards, that like 420 yards now. He's not hitting that in the last week of the season. So Dalton, I'm going to go ahead and give you the W on that. So you're now one game, one spot ahead, pending Antonio Gibson. In the overall standings.
So not only did Big Ben give me a fantasy championship because I played against him, but he might give me this championship if Gibson can do what I need.
It's possible. Who is the Washington football team?
The New York Giants.
Oh boy.
So it is very possible.
I feel less good about that one. John and I were both on the over on Big Ben. Not my fault. Big Ben stinks so badly. His did anyone see his passing chart from Monday night?
You mean how it was all 2 yards?
Not even that. There were like 10 of them that were behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I can't believe they had him throw it 50 times. I feel very bad for Big Ben because it's akin to elder abuse, what we see the Steelers do every week with him.
Oh, Big Ben. AJ Brown, his over-under was 1,200 and a half receiving yards. Dalton was over. John and I were under. Injury partially, but also he just wasn't having a good year before the injuries, has come on strong down the stretch. But it's been frustrating that it hasn't quite come together for him this year when it feels like it really should have, especially with guys being out and like him getting even more volume, because he's not a guy that I feel like the defense can really focus on and take away. Because if you're going to do that, fine, just throw a bubble screen and let him take it 20 yards. Like, I don't really get why he was so up and down this year.
Oh, I can tell you it's Ryan Tannehill. Next question.
Well, yes, but and I think honestly more so down the stretch, Derrick Henry being out has completely changed how effective and how that offense runs and how effective it is. So I don't know what that says about Dynasty going forward. You would think there's going to be a new quarterback there at some point, but
I think even with, and I'd have to look this up so no one quote me on this, even with his injury, he was like 4th or 5th in the league in uncatchable passes thrown his way. It's very, very frustrating because you'd see the stat line, and I know this because I was an owner of him. He'd have like 15 targets and 6 catches, and you'd be like, what is he doing? And then you'd go back and look at some of the throws. You'd be like, that's not a target. Mm-hmm. That's an end zone bomb that went nowhere.
So the next guy, I'm happy to say I was the only one to take the under on Odell Beckham Jr., 925 and a half receiving yards. That one obviously had some extenuating circumstances, but he's like at 500 and something right now. And it's funny, he's already I'd have to look at the games played, actually. It may be closer than I think, but he's basically already equaled his Cleveland production in LA.
That I cannot believe Baker Mayfield. I know he was injured, but he had been so bad even when Odell was there. I remember the last 2 games, Baker missing Odell on deep routes where Odell's wide open. It's just very frustrating from an entire standpoint. We might have wasted 1 or 2 years of what could have been a quality NFL talent because the Cleveland Browns.
I think Odell has had more than that wasted because there were some years before he got there that were also
that is true.
Not great. And he's also had a lot of injuries too. So between bad quarterback play and injuries, it's been tough for a guy that was like a generational talent his rookie year.
This offseason, he just needs to have lunch with Matthew Stafford every day and get the Cooper Kupp treatment.
No kidding. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I wouldn't think. Like, it just depends on what he wants, because if he wants to try and win a Super Bowl, then yeah, maybe. Although I don't think Stafford's ever going to win a Super Bowl, but we'll see. That could get old ticks exposed in about a month, but not with the way he's playing. I don't think it will. But if he wants to win a Super Bowl, or if he wants to go somewhere with like a pretty good quarterback and a clear need for a receiver. So his fantasy value very up in the air if he's on your dynasty team.
Yeah, and he's getting old. And we still have questions whether or not he can stay healthy at this point in his career.
Yep, although he's been pretty healthy this year, I will say. Mike Davis, over under 800 and a half rushing yards. We all took the under. We were all pretty smart there. That one was pretty safely under. Now, I will say, Cordell Patterson was not the reason why I thought that was going to be right, but it worked out.
Should we go back and reevaluate how we came to the conclusion that just nothing in Atlanta would work on the run game? Like, he was there and no one really mentioned him in the offseason. Like, we all knew that Mike Davis wasn't going to be the guy, but we just
Well, I thought Davis would be the starter, and I think everyone thought he'd be the starter. I think we just thought he would be less of an every down back than other people because outside of when he was pressed into duty in Carolina, that's obviously never been his role.
Yeah, well, at least we got one season of Cordell, but I think that's all we're getting of him.
We got like 14 games. We got like 14 games of Cordero. All right, Lamar Jackson over under 900.5 rushing yards. We all took the over. This one's incredibly frustrating because he's at 767 rushing yards in 12 games. So like he was breaking that pretty easily if he even plays 15 of 17 games this year. It just misses 2 games. So that one's pretty unfortunate.
And he's been getting the Joe Mixon treatment the last 4 games where Harbaugh's like, yeah, he could play. He could definitely play, and he doesn't play every week.
And then now this week, Harbaugh is like, I'm not going to say much about that. Not going to say much about it. Technically, this one could still hit the over if he plays this week and has, 133 rushing yards, 134 rushing yards. But I don't think either of those are going to happen. At this point, I'm not going to assume he's playing until he's playing with the way it's gone.
Yeah, Lamar was probably on pace to be QB1 because he was the entire offense for Baltimore. And I think our offseason takes that he was being undervalued are still correct despite him.
Yeah, he had a weird season. I know obviously their whole team had injuries, but their receivers, or at least their 2-man guys, were healthy enough. The passing at the beginning of the season, I mean, remember, he threw for 1,000,000 yards and like complete almost every pass in whatever game that was it against the Raiders?
The Raiders was the first game.
Yeah, well, but no, it wasn't that. It was like week 2 or something. I think I don't remember who it was against, and he was passing the ball great to start the year, and the passing definitely regressed as the season went on. So a little unsure what to make of that, but yeah, obviously he still would have been a very, very highly ranked quarterback. Just with the rushing.
Yeah. Although still top 5 this offseason. No one overthink it.
Yep. So this next one, this is where we need Judge Pham to make his ruling. So this is the side bet. Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus J.K. Dobbins. Who finishes higher? Now, obviously, we made this one before J.K. Dobbins got hurt. I know if you were purely placing this bet in Vegas, you would lose your money. But if it's a bet amongst friends, I feel like that's a null. That bet is null when the guy gets hurt before the season. If it's week 1, it's fair game. But before the season, and even not just before the season, but week 1 of preseason. So very early on in our podcasting. That's my case.
I will say, since this is a friendly wager, side bet, no money is going to be on the line. This happened. We made the bet when we thought when they were both healthy, it should just be a null.
Then I want Will Fuller.
Will Fuller played this year, though.
He had yards. Yeah, he got yards.
But he played
2 games.
No,
he got yards.
He actually played this year, though.
2 games.
But he played.
How many did Dobbins play? Exactly.
It's not my fault he tore his ACL.
Well, you bet on Will Fuller, who you knew could get hurt at any point during the season.
Player could get hurt at any point in the season.
Well, can any player miss a whole season with a finger injury?
I'm not going to say what I was going to
say. This one I also think has to be null because he only started 1 game. Ryan Fitzpatrick, to start every game this season, injury aside, he started 1 game. I don't know what you do with that because he never had the opportunity to get benched or not get benched. So I think the point of that bet is...
Well, technically, he could have got benched in the first game. Technically.
He literally got hurt in the first game.
Could have been benched before the injury.
So I think that one, the whole point of that bet, the whole spirit of the bet is pretty much out the window when it's a season long, will he get benched or not? And he literally plays 2 quarters. So that one I also think is null, which... Great for me, that 2 bets that I still think Fitzpatrick would have got benched. So I think we would have been a wash on on the null bets there. This one is funny. Mike Williams, week 10 and on, a top 24 receiver. Dalton says yes. I say no. He finished. Dalton, you want to guess? Are you looking at our spreadsheet right now or no?
I'm not.
Do you
Did he finish
where
wide
he
receiver
finished?
25? Because
Wide receiver 26, and just like probably like 3 points. I have to pull up the rankings, but probably like it was literally like 2 or 3 points behind top 24.
from week 10 to week 17?
Yep, week 10 on.
Oh, I hate my life.
So the player bets did not go so well, but I'll tell you what did go well.
It's actually 0.8 points.
Well,
oh my god!
maybe
Literally one
if
catch.
Maybe if he were vaccinated, he would have had a shot.
Oh,
to
that's pain. Where do you stand in
Maybe you
points?
should have done your own research on his vaccine status a couple of weeks ago.
In points per game, he's top 20.
Well, too bad that wasn't the bet. So on player props, it was Dalton 16 and 11, actually going to be 17 and 10 after the what did I say? What did I say that you want? Oh, the Big Ben bet.
The Big Ben.
So you're going to be 17 and 10. I am now 15 and 13. Johnny now 14 and 14. Player bets: Evan 4-0, Dalton 0-4. And now
After we nixed 2 of them.
Team totals, which did not go my way. Now, I will say, I made this point off air. I should have just bet what I felt the strongest about, but I really I felt pretty strongly about these, not trying to cop out there. But I was going a little bit more for content. Like, I definitely would have said Lions under. I would have said Texans under, which would have been wrong. That would have been a push. So I at least would have got one. But Cowboys under, Chargers under, Dolphins over, all wrong. 0-3 for me. And then I did Dalton's versus Broncos straight up. Broncos had a real chance to win me that bet last week. They did not feel inclined to do so. So 0-4 on the teams. Johnny had Texans under 4, which that at best is a push. So that's just a push. Falcons under 7.5. That one is in play. They're at 7 wins right now. Bills over 11. The best they can do is 11. They're at 10 wins right now. So the best you can hope for is a push. So Johnny amazingly is 0-0-0 at the moment on team bets in week 17. And Dalton, Giants under 7 in hindsight, a great bet. Washington football team over 8.5 in hindsight, not a great bet. Saints
Brian Fitz really hurt me by getting hurt.
Saints under 9.5. That one was close. I think they're at 8 wins right now, so the best they can do is 9. Obviously a win there, and then you were on the Broncos side, or the Chargers side, excuse me, of the Broncos-Chargers bet.
Bet against any team that has Drew Lock on their roster next
Yeah,
season.
I'm going to pull Dalton and be like, to be fair, if I knew that Drew Lock was starting any games this year, I would not have made that bet. Well, especially if one of those games was against the Chargers. I definitely wouldn't have made that bet.
Well, I wouldn't have made the Washington football team bet. And this one, I have some questions about because I don't understand how it happened. If their defense is – if you would have told me their defense would be bottom 28 in the NFL – I would have called you an idiot in the offseason.
I think maybe what you're looking for is like bottom 4. Bottom 28
bottom
is
28.
very – I think that would mean top 28, which is very, very broad.
But if you would have told me that in the offseason, I would have called you an idiot. And
what makes it crazier is they were like the worst defense. Maybe it was them and the Chiefs neck and neck. And then Chase their generational talent gets hurt and they get slightly better. Not much, but just slightly better.
So I don't know what's going on there. And also, if you had told me Heineke was going to start some games, I still probably would have said the overhits.
Yeah, me too.
So that's fun.
Speaking of Washington football team, it's been just an outright disaster for poor Terry McLaurin the last 6 or 8 weeks. Just bad.
Did we bet any props on him?
Nope, nothing on McLaurin, but just have noticed a lot of painful looking game logs for him as of late. It's not been pretty.
Yeah, well, when you watch Heineke throw the football 10 yards above his head, it's never pretty.
And when he catches touchdowns, it's like he literally almost dies in the end zone because he gets laid out because he has to completely extend himself and get a rib shot to catch a touchdown. So I don't know what to think about McLaurin and Dynasty because I love the player, but it's always if Washington can just get a quarterback, it's like, well, I think we've been saying that since RG3 tore his ACL in the divisional round. So.
And this is a bad quarterback class we have coming up too. Not a lot of hope, at least for passers.
I would be surprised if either quarterback is waiving their no trade clause and Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson to go play at Washington too.
Yeah. Well, Terry is a special talent, so
he is very good. There's a lot of other issues with that franchise, one of which includes Dalton. You almost had your dynasty team impacted by a stadium falling on top of your player. Very close.
Yes. Luckily, Jalen Hurts is my quarterback for my bench. But yes, the Washington football team tried to injure him by throwing the rebar at him from the stadium.
At least it wasn't the sewage falling his way.
Yeah.
That would have hurt a lot less, but been a lot more unpleasant if it hit him.
Yeah, the Washington football team, Houston, and Jacksonville all need to be relegated. We need to get 3 Canadian Football League teams. That's my new take.
So I could just run through. I don't really want to recap these guys, but I'll just run through some of our sleepers, breakouts, busts, and my guys, just because. And I also had some of my guys that were not in this doc. I know I had Lamar Jackson. I did the newsletter for half of my guys. I know I had him on here. I can't remember the others off the top of my head. I know J.K. Dobbins if he's not on here, which that one obviously null. So sleepers, Devin Singletary, and the deep sleeper for me was Larry Roundtree, which, hey, deep sleeper for a reason. Did not work out.
He got a nice touchdown.
He did, and he had a very cool dance after he did it. Breakout, Brandon Ayuk, looking good the second half of the season. Was rough the first half. He's going to finish still as a top 20 receiver. So I'm going to say Kyle Shanahan kept that one from coming all the way true. DJ Moore, we talked about DJ Moore pain last week.
Did you know if he gets 116 yards for the 4th straight season, he'll have 1,200 yards and 4 scores?
Oh, that's just I don't know what to do about that. Jamal Williams was one of your sleepers, which I think would have been a nice call had he not gotten hurt.
Looked good week 1.
Looked great week 1. Irv Smith, obviously another one that I won't hold you to because he got hurt before the season. See how that works. Breakout, Tyler Lockett. It's been pretty much a similar Tyler Lockett experience to most years. Deontay Johnson, that's a great call. He's wide receiver 8 right now, so that's a great breakout call.
Let's go. Wait, do we get my deep sleeper of Elijah Mitchell? Because I know I picked him.
I don't have him on this list.
Well, he was definitely my deep sleeper before the week 1 podcast.
Must have been a mental note that you made. Bus, David Montgomery, Adam Thielen, not a great call. This is my list, by the way. Adam Thielen, bad. He got hurt, but overall bad call on that bust. Miles Sanders, pretty decent call, and then obviously he got hurt, which made a good call. Derrick Henry, bad call. Very bad call until he got hurt. Dalton, DeAndre Swift, bad call till he got hurt. James Robinson, bad call till he got hurt. Kyle Pitts, I would say that one's a decent call. Great yards, no touchdowns. He wasn't like a full-on bust, but he was a disappointment. For sure.
I did make the J-Rob call before the Travis Etienne injury, which definitely impacted how that one ended up.
For sure. And then Alvin Kamara, which that one hasn't worked out, but he's been hurt, so it has made it look a little bit better on paper. Are my guys here, and then we'll move off of this onto the MVP and the LVP. J.K. Dobbins, can't hold myself to that one, but I'll say I'm 2 for 4 on this one. Jalen Waddle, great call, great my guy call. T. Higgins, great call, great my guy call. Saquon Barkley, bad, very bad my guy call. Dalton, it's kind of the same way. You've got 1 great one, 1 okay, 2 not good. Austin Eckler, great. Probably one of the better calls of the podcast. I'll give you that one. Terry McLaurin, it's okay.
That's
It's probably
not fair. That hurts.
He's probably right about at where he was drafted.
I hear my rant about Ryan Fitzpatrick with wide receiver 1s right now when you talk about Terry McLaurin.
And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which that one, injuries hurt that one. But even then, I don't think he was going to be true my guy status. He would have just been pretty good, I think, this year, it looked like. And then Rondell Moore, that was a deeper shot. It didn't work out, so it is what.
First 2 games, he had 154 yards and looked great.
Yep. It turns out the play, that was a broken play where he caught the ball with no one within 20 yards of him. Not exactly repeatable on a week-to-week basis.
Do you think that there are players in the NFL who can do that? Rondell's the guy.
All right, Dalton. Unless you have anything else to add as we look back at the preseason, I think we can finally get to MVP, LVP, and a little waiver wire hero. Anything else?
I think that's all I have. It was a good season of work. I'm already excited to get into next season and get hurt all over again with all of my wrong calls.
All right, where do you want to start? Do you want to start LVP or MVP?
We can start MVP because unless you went off the road, I'm pretty sure we have the same guy.
There are actually there was a thread today that I was reading, and I was surprised by the amount of names that people had because I thought the same. I thought it was like, okay, it's got to be this guy. But as I was looking, I was like, you know what? There's like 5 guys that I think you can make a legit argument for. But we'll go MVP. I'm going to tweet out the link right now again. So if anyone wants to hop in for MVP, give us your fantasy MVP for 2021.
So I went plain white bread with this one. And just like white bread, this player, I thought the offseason was some same old, same old. It's Cooper Kupp.
So we're different. That's not what I have.
Wow. So the way I went and kind of figured this out is the first thing I looked at was who added more points per game out of the top categories. So Josh Allen was QB1. He had 1.6 more points per game than Tom Brady. Derrick Henry is the RB1 in points per game. He had 0.6 more than Jonathan Taylor. Cooper Kupp has 25.7 points per game. He has 4.1 more fantasy points than Devontae Adams. And then Mark Andrews is 0.7 above Travis Kelce. So that's really the first part that did it. He also only has 1 game less than 90 yards, but has a score. So every game.
What did you say Cooper Kupp was averaging points per game?
25.7. This is PPR, not.
I was going to say, you've got to be looking at PPR.
Yeah,
I'm looking
PPR.
at half. It's 21.5.
Yeah, it's PPR. And
we are half point per podcast.
I know, but this is just how I was looking at it. And he's on pace to join Jerry Rice, Sterling Sharp, and Steve Smith as the only Triple Crown winners in the NFL. That's receptions, yards, and touchdowns. So, I mean, he was just as consistent as he came. And the final thing that broke it for me between him and Jonathan Taylor, who I was considering,
and that's mine. Not to keep the suspense. That was mine. So it was between those two for me as well.
My break was that, like, you could have really whiffed in your draft and he could have still won it for you in your first 2 picks because he was like a later 4th or 3rd round pick.
He was a 4th round pick. So ADP is definitely in Kupp's favor.
So that's why I ended up picking Cooper Kupp. But for those listening, I also played Cooper Kupp in our finals and defeated him. So it is possible.
You defeated Jonathan Taylor, my MVP too. So
yeah,
not in the final, but in the semifinal. Well, so let me ask you, did you consider Deebo Samuel, who was more like an 8th round pick, but finished the year as the wide receiver 3 and literally less than 1 point behind Devontae Adams for wide receiver 2?
Yes. So Deebo was also on my list, but I just couldn't go with Deebo in part because of Kyle Shanahan. Maybe a little pain there. And then as a outside
Shanahan treated Deebo fine. That
is true. And then I also considered Jamar Chase almost strictly on his final championship performance.
Yeah, and he was so I consider both of them as well. Deebo for basically he was top 3. He was an 8th round pick, so you could have built a juggernaut and then had this guy emerge on your team. Jamar Chase, another one, like you said, almost purely off his championship week performance, but if you had Chase on your team, he had so many blow-up weeks that he probably got you to the playoffs. Like he probably won you 3-4 weeks early in the season.
Yeah, imagine being a team that has Chase, not winning the week he blows up and not making the playoffs. Can't be me.
Could not be me. Definitely not. So I went with Jonathan Taylor. Like I said, it was between him and Kupp. And it's funny. They're actually like 1 point apart in half point. Kupp scored like 1 more point than Taylor this year. Taylor is about 145 points better than the RB10. Kupp is about the same for wide receiver. But I think where the edge goes to Taylor for me is when you get further down and you just look at how big of an advantage he gives you at running back. He's like 20 points better than the wide receiver like 30, or than the running back 30 than Kupp was than to the wide receiver 30. Does that make sense? Like you can more easily find startable receivers in that like 30 to 40 range than you can running backs. So I think just inherently the running back position, as we all know, is inherently more valuable in fantasy football. So I think that's a big part of it for me. Because really, unless you're starting a guy, like if you're looking in that range of just like season long, unless you have a guy like Sony Michel who has emerged, or just like another guy like, I don't know, like I think Chuba maybe finished a little higher than that, but a guy who is clearly in that range because of injury, you can't just pluck a guy down there who's not have the injury benefit and start him and have it work out most of the time. And we've talked about, I think this is another big thing too. We've talked about some of those running backs at the top and how their points don't really reflect the value they brought to your team this season. A Najee Harris at running back 4, Zeke at running back 6, who both those guys played every game to get there. Zeke averaged like 13 points. Once you get past Mixon and Eckler, it's pretty much guys who were injured but still awesome enough to be top 10, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, or guys who just played every game and were pretty meh, like Najee and Zeke. And like James Conner, like had some great weeks for you, but he was up and down because of injury and because Chase Edmonds was there earlier on. And then you look at top 10 receivers like Devontae Adams, Debo, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, and Jefferson. Like, I think those guys, even though the scores, like the total points, are very similar, I think they brought more value to your fantasy team than a lot of the top 10 running backs, because they truly won you weeks and helped your team get to the playoffs. So I think that's a big factor too. And just to put Taylor's season in perspective, he had more points than Alvin Kamara as the RB1 last year. And looking back at RB1 seasons, Christian McCaffrey had more than 400 points in 2019. Just ridiculous. That's another discussion. But for Taylor, after inexplicable games in week 2 and 3 where we were losing our minds, he was less than 50% snap share. He was single digits. And I think we even said, like, don't give up on Jonathan. Like, go buy Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, he was a buy low. So if you bought low.
Did we expect this? No, we did not. But I think the process was obviously good and obviously worked out even better than we thought. But once he started playing the snaps after that, he scored double digits every week after that. And he scored more than 27 times, more than 25, or more than 33 times, excuse me. It's really hard to lose in those weeks when your running back does that.
And he scored more than 50 one time.
Yeah, so he had 51 points one time, which is just absurd. He was so good that he's basically worth 2 running back slots, which I just think anytime a guy does that, it's just the most valuable thing in fantasy football to me. If you had Zeke and Saquon Barkley, you would get Jonathan Taylor's points per game. You could have had Zeke and Saquon Barkley all year, or just had Jonathan Taylor. And I think that gives you like more flexibility to trade a running back, which is valuable, and get a better player at receiver. Like, I think you have more team flexibility with a running back who's balling out like that.
Well, what's crazy about Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor, both of them, is that in overall, they're 4th and 5th in points scored. Only Herbert, Brady, and Allen have more fantasy points scored than those guys. And that's really hard to do at a skill position to outscore quarterbacks. And I want to go back this offseason and see how frequently, I mean, CMC, obviously his year. But
let me look at 2019 and see if he was the number one, because that was Lamar's crazy year too. But let me see if Christian McCaffrey, I'm looking at 2018. 2019.
He was number 2 behind the crazy Lamar Jackson season, where Lamar only played 15 games and scored 420 fantasy points.
But he was only behind, if you look at half point, which I don't know why, 421 for Lamar, 413 for Christian McCaffrey. So he was only 8 points behind like the all-time quarterback season. Just insane.
That's just insane.
All right. Your LVP for the season.
So I went wide receiver again on this one. I think there's probably like 15 running backs who could qualify for this, the way things turned out. But I went with Allen Robinson because
I was fully ready for you to say Zeke and for me to have to fight you and fight for Zeke, because I know I just crapped on Zeke a little bit, but RB6 is still RB6. Like, it's still like valuable.
No, I mean, he didn't lose you any games. He certainly didn't win you any games. But Allen Robinson, and in part, this is because of how his season went. I know he missed 3 games for injury, but even then, he was the wide receiver 82. He was not going to finish above wide receiver 60, and he was drafted in the 3rd round. So there was high draft capital on him. You likely went running back, wide receiver, or wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Whatever outlook you were going, he didn't help your team, and he had 9 straight games to start the season of single-digit performances. He actually never eclipsed double-digit and half point, which is horrible, but he was also still making you start him because he was putting up just enough points.
Was he, though? That's what I was going to say. Was he making you start him? Like, I think most people were you were starting him for a while, but I think it got to a point where I would be surprised if too many people in like a standard 12-team league were starting Allen Robinson from like week 7 or 8 on.
Well, and when you look at it, like week 1, he has a 6.5, and you justify it because he's playing Jalen Ramsey in the Rams. Mm-hmm. Then he has a 9.4 against the Bengals. You're thinking, okay, we're getting things going. He drops back down to a 3.7. Then he's a 7.8. So he's right there in the cusp so frequently that it's incredibly frustrating. He finishes the season with 6 targets against the New York Giants for 5.5 points. And that's part of the frustration. Weeks 15 and 16, where you got him back, if you were in some situation where you had to start him, which I don't think many people did, he was straight zeros in games he started. He wasn't injured. He played the full game. And then worst of all, I mean, he had 36 catches in total, and he's 82nd receiving yards, only had 1 touchdown. Just with the high draft capital you were spending on him, he probably cost a lot of people their early season starts, because I would say you had him you started him at least your first 5 games.
Yeah, no, for sure. You definitely got off to a slow start, but I think he at least spared you at some point in the season where you actually thought you could bench him. And that's more than I could say for my LVP. But real quick, before we get into that, we have a waiver wire hero coming up. We're almost at waiver wire zeros. And I have to say that if we did, it would have been Chuba Hubbard for me. You want to know something funny? He finished 1 spot and 3 points ahead of Christian McCaffrey in more than double the games this year.
Wow, that's very hard to do. I don't even know how you manage that.
I know the total game count is a little deceiving because, like, obviously the games McCaffrey played, Hubbard didn't play that much, but it's still funny.
Yeah, talk about, well, and that's just a handcuff that will never be like his whatever you call the starter.
Yeah, it's not an Alexander Madison, Dalvin Cook situation. All right, my fantasy LVP. This guy, I do think every week he was active, you probably started him. Unless you listen to Dalton, the 1 week he was Dalton's sit of the week, last week or 2 weeks ago. And that's Saquon Barkley. He played 13 games, really 12, but he was active in 13 games, got hurt early in one of them. But he was the RB 33. Like, even in that amount of games, you would expect better from Saquon. Christian McCaffrey played 7 games and was the RB 37. Like, wasn't very far off. And you look at, like, DeAndre Swift, 12 games. He's a top 20 running back. David Montgomery, 13 games. He's a top 20 running back. And then, like, Nick Chubb, cream of the crop as far as that goes. He plays 13 games. He's a top 10 running back. He's RB 10. So Saquon, you either took him depending on when your draft was with a first or second round pick. And to take a running back that high and to have him just kill you week after week is just devastating to your team. And this is a tough one for me to swallow, because I think as the season went on, he looked like Saquon Barkley to me. Like, he looked great. The situation just became such that even he could not overcome it. I mean, everyone saw the stat. They threw 11 times and lost by like 27. It was like the first instance that I think it was Heath Miller, or not Heath Miller. That's the Steelers freaking
tight end.
Yeah, Heath, whatever Heath's last name is at CBS, found that stat, and like Statheads didn't have any other game in their system of any other instance of that happening. The Giants are 32nd in every offensive category since Joe Judge took over. Like, they say he's going to be back. I can't see how that's going to happen, but it seemingly is going to. So
have you got a chance to listen to his post-game presser?
Oh no, I don't listen.
He went on he was talking about how he knows there are players who played for the Giants in the NFL who want to come back and play for the Giants, and how things aren't as bad as they look. And they asked Kadarius Toney about it, and Kadarius Toney said, "I didn't even listen to him." I mean, you cannot lose your locker room more than that man has. But sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know where that leaves Saquon, like, long term. He's probably going to drop like a 3rd round pick next year. like early third, late second, I'm probably still going to take him because I just think that if the situation is just like normal bad, like it had been in New York before, I think he has a great chance to smash that value. But this year, he and the situation just killed you. He failed to reach double-digit scoring in 7 of 13 games. He got hurt against Dallas, so really it was 6 of 12. But still, if Saquon plays 12 games, you'd think he'd reach double digits more than 6 times. And even if he did only have 6 of 12, you would really hope, okay, he's got a blow-up game, a couple blow-up games that really turned my week. Like he may have lost me some games, but he won me some weeks too. He only had more than 20 points one time this season. He only topped 15 points 3 times this season. Look back at 2019. Again, Giants, very bad back then too. His first 3 full games, he played 2 games, sprained his ankle, and then the first game he came back. He was over 15 points all 3 of those games. So he used to be 15 points or more just pretty much every week. Even when he was quote-unquote struggling, he was 15 points, and he just wasn't even close to that this season. And it's honestly it's depressing to talk about, depressing to think about. If you did make the playoffs with Saquon on your team, you probably didn't, but if you did not survive his 7-point outing in week 1 of the playoffs. But even if you did survive the 7-point outing in week 1 of the playoffs, you definitely didn't survive his 3-point outing in the semifinals. 20 total points in the playoffs weighed it down for me too. In weeks he was active, in weeks that you probably started him. So if you started Saquon, at best, you got 4th place in your league, I'm guessing. At best.
Well, what's weird is in those 3 games, he didn't have a 60% snap share. So they weren't even giving him a full in any of those games. Mm-hmm. And what makes me mad about this LVP pick is that a lot of people faded Saquon for the wrong reasons, and it worked out for them. We knew he wasn't going to start the season off great because of his surgery, and anybody who was listening to reports early on knew that, even when they were talking about him missing OTAs. And there are people who faded him for that reason, and that's not the reason he ended up bad. It's just that Joe Judge, since he entered the NFL, is 31st in touchdowns because he's such a poor coach.
Okay, I've got a stat for you. I bookmarked this tweet. I have to pull up my bookmarks. It's right here somewhere. Oh, I'm on the half point. I want to give credit because I'm pretty sure it's also Heath from CBS, but oh no, I didn't bookmark it. Well, I like the tweet. But this is a great New York Giants stat. Oh no, this is Warren Sharp. First of all, 2 stats. One from Warren Sharp, one from Dan Orvalsky. First one from Warren Sharp. The Giants, for the last 5 years, at any point, they have not been above 500 at any point in the last 5 years. That is remarkable. Not even 1-0, not even 2-1. So that's number 1. Number 2, specifically referring to this year, the Giants have scored 1 touchdown in their last 35 possessions. That's impossible. That's impossibly bad.
I can't believe that they're bringing him back. And if you were drafting Giants players this offseason, your hope is that he gets fired very early in the season.
Mm-hmm. I'm doing mental gymnastics trying to figure out if I'm going to try and trade for him off of Ty's team in our dynasty league, but I don't think I can do it. I know I said I'd take him in the 2nd or 3rd round in redraft, but man, it's just so bad there right now. And situations change. They change every year. I just said Michael Carter. That New York team is like a normal level bad, and he was a top 30 running back, and it's not nearly as good as Saquon Barkley. But yeah, it's so bad right now.
I mean, the fact that a team has Kenny Galladay and Saquon Barkley just hurts me as a fantasy player because they miss you. And now Kadarius Toney even. Yep. I mean, all of those guys would be super fun to watch on even a normal functioning team.
Evan Ingram is gonna get a post Giants bump wherever he goes next year, I think.
Yeah, we'll call it the Adam Gase bump 2.0.
So Evan Ingram, I still think he stinks, but he's gonna at least be like productive enough to be interesting next year if he goes to a good spot. All right, waiver wire heroes, real quick, and we'll get out of here. Dalton, who is your waiver wire hero of the season?
I thought this one was pretty easy for me. I went back and looked, by the way. Episode 44 of our podcast is where I picked this guy as a deep dynasty sleeper. Mm-hmm. It was Elijah Mitchell. First of all, week 17, if you had him on your team, he scored 20 points, gave you a good shot at winning your playoffs. From weeks 5 through 13, he was 11th in points per game. I didn't just randomly pick an arbitrary number. That's when he came back from injury.
Mhm.
And in total on the season, he was 16th in points per game. And when healthy, he had 63% of the running back carries and targets in a Shanahan offense. That's basically unheard of for any Shanahan coach team. We never see a running back get that much work, which is really I'm really sad because I'm probably going to be in on Elijah Mitchell this offseason.
Nope, he's. I'm telling you, when we're gonna do a too early bust, or like we're gonna do like an overrated list pretty soon.
And he's going to be the guy.
He's gonna be my number one bust right now.
Is it because of Kyle Shanahan?
It's because I really don't think he's that good. I don't think he's that good, he himself. Like, if Trey Sermon ever gets back on track, I still think Sermon is the better prospect. Like, Elijah Mitchell is a good one-cut runner, and that works for Shanahan, but he is not as good of an overall player as Sermon. I still don't think. And I don't think guys have hit, like, I think he's going to be the guy that people are propping up because of that volume, because of that offense, as like a top 15 to 18 running back, and I'm just going to be scared to do that. It's Kyle Shanahan.
Well, I'm all here for the Trey Sermon love, but I do think if you got him off your waiver wire week 1,
yep,
I think this was a clear win for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know he was banged up here and there, but every week he played, he put out points and he gave you a good shot at winning your games.
So I thought there was a strong chance you were going to pick him. So I did not. I thought about it. I also wanted to highlight Rashad Penny a little bit here too. He was the waiver wire hero of all heroes in the playoffs, him and Amon-Ra St. Brown. But Penny, at the running back, I have a bias for good or bad at running back when it comes to these things for fantasy, because that tends to swing things a little bit more. In the first 12 weeks of the season, he did like literally nothing, was active like a couple times, obviously was hurt, so like wasn't even around for a while. He came back for a little while and was like behind crappy veterans for a couple of weeks. But when he got a chance, he was like mostly great. He had a couple single-digit games, but he had 3 games of double figures. He scored more than 25 points twice, including obviously a huge game just last week. He's the RB1 from weeks 13 to 17, like a non-small, so almost a third of the season. Rashad Penny is your overall RB1. And I think total points. I think points per game, somebody may have had him just barely, but just absolutely absurd.
I hate it.
And here's the thing. He was like legit good. It wasn't like empty stats. It was like what we were sold on Penny coming out of college. He's a big guy who should not be that fast and that big. Like, and I've got this chart. Have you seen the Rashad Penny chart from Ben Baldwin, Dalton? Have you seen that?
I have not.
All right, I'm going to show this to you then. I want to share just the tab or just the window. If you're not watching on YouTube, you should watch. It'll give you a lot clearer picture. So this is the chart here. This is yards over expected.
I have seen this.
Per carry versus run blocking. It was Jonathan Taylor pretty much all season, as you can see right there. Very high up. The size of the circle is volume. So obviously Rashad Penny, very low volume. But look at what he did when he got chances down the stretch. Look at how good that is. He's so clearly that's just insane how good he was down the stretch.
Yeah, pour one out for the Chiefs running back duo down there in the far right corner with a great run block grade and poor runners.
Also, look at Chuba way down here. Alex Collins way down here. Kamara, shockingly, pretty far down here.
Tell me how you feel about that chart telling me Booker's better than Saquon.
Not great. Not great.
Yeah, just to follow up with that, though, just in the fantasy playoffs, I sent this tweet. It's from Graham Barfield. Rashad Penny was the RB3 behind only Damian Harris and Devin Singletary, which, again, shows you just how wild this season has been, that those are the top 3 running backs in your fantasy playoffs. In fact, Jonathan Taylor was only the RB8. Sony Michel was the RB7.
In weeks 13 through 17, I think Jonathan Taylor was the RB4 in that stretch too. So not even like top, like running back 2 in that 5-week stretch.
Sometimes consistency is what matters.
His 51-point game must have just got cut off of that stretch.
I will be interested to see his consistency score when the fantasy footballs come out with that, just because.
Well, he like I said, he was only single digits twice. He was
Yeah.
double digits so often. It's going to be good.
Can you name the last running back to score 50 points before Jonathan Taylor?
Well, probably Alvin Kamara last year, right?
Yep.
But he had a bazillion touchdowns.
Yeah, 6 touchdowns.
A bazillion to be
A
more
bazillion
accurate.
to be statistically accurate.
All right, Dalton. Anything else before we hop out of here at a way longer podcast than I thought? But it was a good discussion on a lot of different players. I thought. Anything that we should add before we get out of here?
I think I'm good to go. Thanks for all the Russian comments in the stream. Not sure what's going on there.
We had some of those last week too, so
I know.
I'm not sure if we've been hacked. Everybody, if you're interested, keep a close eye on Antonio Gibson. That will determine if we have to have a tiebreaker, playoff, something or other. Again, this year we could do underdog, player prop, tiebreaker, or something.
Or Big Ben could throw for 500 yards.
I just don't think so. All right, we will talk to you guys. I think we'll be back next week. I think we'll try and keep it weekly through the Super Bowl. And then after the Super Bowl, it'll be a little less frequent. And then after the draft, we'll probably after the draft and free agency, we'll really shut it off for a little while, I think. But thank you guys so much for listening, as always. Perhaps when we return next week, Johnny will be $100 richer. We'll see about that. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at halfpoint per pod. We'll probably be trying some stuff on all those platforms in the offseason. Develop maybe some new stuff for next year. Subscribe to the YouTube. That way you can see charts like the one that I put up on the screen instead of having to have me just explain it to you. And obviously listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, anywhere else. And we'll talk to you guys next week.